Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We're so pleased you're here for our Washington Intern Program Info session. I'm pleased to have Mel Andrada join us from UF Federal Relations. She is the Federal Relations Associate in the UF DC office and our partner in this program. I'm also pleased to introduce you all to two new faculty members who are joining the Bob Graham Center this June. We have Dr. Cornacione, who's joining us as our Civic Engagement Coordinator, and Dr. Kevin Bird, who will be joining us as the Experiential Learning Coordinator. For those of you who are going through this interview and internship placement process, you will have the chance to meet Dr. Bird more extensively later this summer. And thank you both for joining us today. All right, Dorothy, next slide, please. So today we just gave a few welcome and introductions. We'll give you a brief overview of the program. We will walk you through the application process. For anyone who has applied in the past, the application process will be slightly different this time around. And then we will give you the opportunity for question and answer at the end. Next slide. So as many of you know, the Washington Internship Program is a partnership between the Bob Graham Center for Public Service and UF's Office of Federal Relations. We offer internships each semester. We do 5 placements typically. At times there could be more or fewer. We do them during the spring, summer, and fall semesters. It's a 40-hour-a-week internship. You take academic course credit. Mel works with our team and many others in DC to provide professional development and networking opportunities. And we also require a capstone policy and communications project at the end, where we offer you the chance to review a public policy area of your choice and do a presentation at the conclusion. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the internship this fall will be in person and 40 hours a week. It will run generally August through December, although some placements could start as late as Labor Day. You are required to take IDS 4940, or you can take credit in your home department. We work with you once you are placed in the program to discuss how many credits you would like and what financial aid you might have that would require further course credit. We also offer a $1,500 scholarship. That's a minimum of $1,500. We are looking at our numbers right now to see if we're able to offer additional funding during the fall semester. And finally, we pay for your housing. Students live in the Washington Intern Student Housing Program in the Capitol Hill townhouses. The lease will run from August 20th to December 10th. So you'll have some flexibility on when you want to move in or move out. All apartments are furnished and shared bedrooms, dorm style. And then finally, Mel, would you take a minute to talk about some of the professional development opportunities they might experience?
Yeah, of course. So interning in DC in the fall is a really exciting time because there aren't that many students who come in the fall. So there's a lot of opportunities for you to meet new people and go to a lot of networking opportunities. So like Marianne said, our office, the Federal Relations Office, will put on networking opportunities throughout the semester. So we'll try to make it a pretty regular thing, either weekly or monthly. And that really depends on the interns we select and what you're interested in. So if you know there's an area of policy that you're very interested in, like, for example, this semester, the spring semester, the group was very interested in defense, FBI, that kind of fun, spicy stuff. So we tried to put on networking events related to those fields. If you're interested in foreign policy, stuff like that, we'll try to connect you with alums who are in the DC area who are working in those fields. So sometimes that'll be a Zoom call, a personal like lunch with the alum, whatever we can put together in this current, COVID climate. But yeah, stuff like that. We also work with Florida House. So if you're not familiar with Florida House, Florida is the only state in the country to have its own embassy in DC. So they'll oftentimes host events and great networking opportunities, especially to meet more people on the Hill. So we do work closely with them, and we work with the Alumni Association, the DC Gator Club. They're always putting on events, especially in the fall when it's football season. They'll have watch parties throughout the semester. So that's a really great way to meet new people. And also we're the lobbyists of UF. We tend to know most Gators in DC. So if there's a specific person, specific agency, or anyone in the area that you're interested in getting to know, or like I said earlier, a policy area, we can most likely connect you with someone in that field.
It's worth also noting what Mel was sharing there. We have the Bob Graham Center and the UF's Beyond 120 program are making a trip to DC next week. And there are lots of private and public employers in the area who are UF alums. And so if you were interested, for example, in the US Chamber of Commerce or in publishing, there are places and meetings that we can set up for you while you're in DC. So it's a great chance for you and the cohort that are selected to talk about what areas you're interested in and work with Dr. Bird and Mel to design a program that fits for you all this fall. Absolutely. Next slide, please. So just very briefly, I will say that there are two primary areas that we place students in. One is in Mel's office and the other is with a Florida Congressional member. Mel, would you talk briefly about the different placements and what students should consider when filling out their application?
Yeah, so if you're selected for WIP, we'll ask you for your preferences. Like Marianne said, if you'd rather work in the UF Federal Relations Office or if you want to work on Capitol Hill. So you can put anyone of interest in the Florida delegation. That's who we have the most connections with, the Florida delegation. So like on the slide, it says like our Gator Caucus members, Senator Rubio, Representative Wasserman Schultz, Gus Bilirakis, Greg Stubbe is also an alum, but it could be anybody in the delegation that you're interested in, and we'll try to place you with that office, or you can be placed in the Federal Relations Office. So I can dive into, I guess, the difference of the two. So a Capitol Hill internship, you'd be part of that member of Congress, part of their staff. And every office is different, but a lot of offices have very similar experiences for their interns and have very similar duties. So your main duty would most likely be constituent services. So answering the phone, answering constituent phone calls, answering constituent emails, and answering any questions or concerns your constituents may have in regards to your office. And also, you know, your basic administrative duties that are very important to make sure the office is running smoothly. And with the Federal Relations Office, you're not really doing constituent phone calls, but you are our eyes and ears in DC. So fun fact, the University of Florida is part of every higher education association under the sun. It feels like hundreds almost sometimes. So your main job would be to be sitting on those calls, attending hearings for us, and just making sure that we're keeping track of everything that's going on in the higher ed community. So that's kind of a basic rundown of what your day-to-day would look like for either placement.
Thanks so much, Mel. That's really helpful. Dorothy, next slide, please. So just very briefly, let's go through the application process and important dates so that you all can get to any pressing questions you might have. Applications for the fall cohort are due on Sunday, May 15th at 11:59 p.m. There is an online application process. There's a set of required questions, a reference requirement, and a writing sample requirement. I get a lot of questions about the writing sample. So just to address that, we're looking for something that's between 2 and 3 pages. It could be a memo, it could be an op-ed you wrote, it could be an article. We are not looking for term papers. In general, what we're looking for are professional communications because that is what most of the internship will be about. And for a reference, that is our newest piece of the application process. In the past, we asked you all for recommendation letters, and Mel and I, after discussing it with some students and partners, have decided to move towards a reference model. So you should think about someone who is a professional reference or an academic reference that we could call on if you were selected. This will help save you and faculty members time. We get a lot of letters coming in, and the reference you should make sure to provide both an email and a phone number. Finally, we will notify candidates about the interviews no later than Friday, the 20th, but likely sooner, and we will conduct the interviews the week of May 23rd. If you are accepted into the program, we will let you know by May 31st, possibly sooner, and we ask that you confirm your participation by Friday, June 3rd. From there, Mel and I and Dr. Bird, once he is here, will start to work with you on your placements. There will be a virtual orientation in early August with a follow-up in-person component once you arrive in DC, and then your internship will begin no later than September 6th. Some of them will begin earlier, and then it shouldn't end any later than December 9th because housing will close on December 10th. Mel, do you want to add anything there on the timeline at this point?
No, communication is key. Accepted program, letting us know your preferences and just being very communicative while we try to place you in the office is very important.
Actually, that's a good point to end on there, Mel, about the placement process. So that is a little bit like a dating app gone wrong in the sense of we'll match you with someone. It might not work for you. It might not work for them. They may have additional requirements that we don't have. Like they may want a term paper. They may want you to interview with 3 people in their office. So it's really important in terms of meeting the congressional members' requirements and timelines that you're as responsive as possible. For those of you who might be studying abroad this summer or traveling or enrolled in other classes, we can absolutely work around your schedule. The biggest thing is to make sure that you have at minimum access to email so that once we notify you that you're able to work with us. Dorothy, could you move to the next slide? So finally, any questions? And you're welcome to use the chat box or the raise hand feature. I know there have to be questions. Kristen?
Hi, yeah. I wanted to know if ever applying before makes an impact on your current application or if like that's on record or shows up.
So that's a good question. I thought we had a question in there that asked if you had applied before. Because we did want to consider that. If that is not in there, we do have the list of previous applicants and pull that information regularly. But if you want to have any conversation during office hours or something, Kristen, about your application, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hi, Andy.
Hi. So I'm wondering if it's possible for an intern to be working in both the congressional office and the UF Office of Federal Relations.
It's a great question. I think the short answer is yes, but I'll let Mel answer that one.
So I don't want to say no, because that it could be a possibility, but because like I said earlier, there's a lot less students who come in the fall. If you are accepted for a Capitol Hill internship, you will most likely be one of very few interns in their office, which means they'll really get some work out of you. So you may not have time to intern in our office as well. But if you're very interested in the work that we're doing as an office, we'll never say no to another helping hand or for you to have that experience. A lot of offices on the Hill now will do a hybrid situation. So they'll have their interns come maybe 3 or 4 times out of the week and 1 or 2 days are working from home remotely. So if you're very interested in working with the Federal Relations Office, we could work something out so that you come in on your remote day. And you work from our office and you're of course still helping out your congressional office, where we can give you some extra projects to do if you're interested in any of the work that we're doing.
Thank you.
Of course.
Well, there are 2 questions in the chat that I would like to answer for everyone. So the first comes from Emerson about whether it's acceptable to submit the application as a PDF. Unfortunately, it is not. We provide the PDF so that people can see the set of questions being asked, but we do take all the data in Qualtrics. It's how we're able to sort information more quickly. Savannah, for your question, Mel, correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe that the fall application and spring application cycles are typically less competitive than summer. Summer is highly competitive. It's when the most people are in DC.
Yes, that's correct. Like most most people want it, are available to intern in the summer. So it's by far the most competitive semester. Fall and spring are still pretty competitive. Interning on Capitol Hill will always be competitive, but in comparison to summer, it's a little bit less competitive.
And one other adjustment we're making for those of you who've joined us and might be around next summer as well, we will be opening summer and spring applications this fall. We will go to a 2-cycle application format rather than 3. So you'll have an info session twice a year max and 2 opportunities to apply for 3 different semesters. I have a private question here about housing and what to do about your fall course schedule that I want to quickly answer. First of all, housing is paid for in full. We pay the deposits, and we also pay for your housing. What you do have to do is sign off on their forms and also their COVID protocols, which are not UFs. And then for your fall classes, you may want to keep some of those. If you have an asynchronous course or even a synchronous course that's offered fully online, those are courses you might want to keep. I can also say that the Graham Center is offering IDS 2338 this fall, and that will be an asynchronous online course on democratic engagement and public leadership. And one more question here in the chat. Can you apply for both the summer and spring applications at the same time? I do not have the answer to that question yet, Sophia. We just recently decided to move to the 2 application cycle, and that'll be a conversation with Dr. Bird, Mel, and myself when he joins us here, unless he wants to make a decision right now, which I'm thinking no. But we will make a decision and let you know, Sophia. That's a great question and gives us something to consider. Mel, there are a couple other questions too that I've received privately. Could you describe a typical day in DC?
Ooh,
in a congressional office or in your
okay.
office?
Okay. So like I was saying earlier, I can divide it into the 2. So for a congressional office, your main responsibility will be constituent services. So depending on the day, you may answer up to 50 to 100 phone calls from constituents. That sounds like a lot. I promise you it's not. As someone who has done that job before, 100 phone calls is very doable. And people will oftentimes have quick, simple questions, or they'll just want to state their opinions over a policy issue the member of Congress is working on. Sometimes, people are a little bit more passionate than others, and there's protocol for how to handle those calls. But yeah, that's what your day would mostly look like, answering those phone calls and being of service to the constituents in any way that is fit. And also helping the staff. So whatever the legislative assistants, the staff assistant, the correspondence, whatever they need from the interns, whether it's administrative stuff or help writing memos or attending hearings, that's where each office is different and what they'll ask of you. And there's a lot of opportunities going on to meet new people as an intern. Like you'll always have opportunities to meet other interns in other offices and attend cool events now that COVID restrictions are becoming a little bit more looser in the district and things are opening up. A lot of events are starting again. So I anticipate by the time fall comes around, there will be a lot more receptions. And pre-COVID, they used to say that you could find a free meal every day because there was always a reception going on. I really think those days are coming back. So a lot of exciting things for you to do throughout the day in a Capitol Hill internship. And same with the Federal Relations Office, it'll look a little bit different. Our office is a little bit smaller, but we also attend a lot of those congressional receptions and those events too. And we have, we're cool enough to work with the entire delegation, so we have all those opportunities for our interns. But like I was saying earlier, your main job would be to be our eyes and ears with all the associations and universities are part of. So you'd sit in on those calls, those hearings, and any events related to the university's issues, and you would take notes and let us know what's being discussed.
Thanks so much, Mel. It's also worth noting that there will be at least one opportunity where you will likely meet with the Vice President of Government Relations and Mel's office, as well as Dr. Bird in DC for sort of a welcome lunch that September. So there will be opportunities also sort of internal to the cohort that aren't outward facing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Leadership will come to lobby or to do a bunch of meetings in DC throughout the semester. So whenever they're in town, we like to introduce them to our interns and, like Marianne said, maybe have a lunch. So it's really cool actually to meet the administration and, behind the scenes people of the university.
And finally, there were 2 other questions sent directly to me. One is about housing. So I know that some of you may have family or friends in DC. We do prefer that you live in the housing provided as it's part of the cohort experience and it is paid for. However, if there is something that we should consider offline, I'm happy to set up a time to discuss that. because that is a reality that some of you may have contacts there already, or even family in the area. And the second question I got was about upperclassmen applications and what does an ideal applicant look like? Great question. So I should have started with this, and apologies. This opportunity is for undergraduates only. We do not accept graduate students into this particular program at this time. That's not to say we won't at a later date. And that's also not to say that if you are a graduate student here on this call, that we can't offer you advice on where you might search for internships. And I know that UF Federal Relations wants to know anytime someone's interning in DC and stay connected to you. What I will say about upperclassmen versus underclassmen applications is this. If you want to think about how long you have been at UF, because some of you will come in with credits that appear junior level. However, you have not had any time on UF's campus yet. If you are a junior or senior, preference is given to those applications to upperclassmen. That is not to say that there are not applications that stand out as sophomores and freshmen. Although I cannot remember a time since we started placing them in person where we've accepted a freshman applicant. This program's gone through many transitions because it started the semester that we went on lockdown. And so most internships until this last fall, in fact, all of them were virtual and only 20 hours a week. So this is all kind of new for us as well. What I will say that makes a strong applicant are clear and concise responses to the questions and really articulating why you are a good fit for this program and what you hope to learn from it. We do not need applicants that know everything about interning in DC or working for a congressional member. We need applicants who are interested in civic engagement, public service, and public leadership, and learning about the democratic process. Mel, do you want to add anything else about that?
I think you covered most of it. The thing that I would add is I personally like to look for students who I think are very mature and who can handle a fast-paced environment. The Hill is an interesting place to work. It's very fast-paced. It's hard at times. DC is a big city, so I look for students who will have that maturity, who will have taken their experience from UF and will be able to apply it to life in DC for a semester and just make the most out of this opportunity.
Thanks, Mel. There are a couple other questions, and if I miss any of you, please let me know. There's a question here about how many hours a week is the current in-person program. It's 40 hours a week. And another question, what if this is our first year on campus, but due to our credits, we are graduating 2 years early? Okay, so it sounds to me like you'll only be here for 2 years. I would say let's set up a separate time to meet to talk about your application and when you would want to intern. I would not recommend, if this is your first semester on campus, applying for this fall, but we can talk about that. And once Dr. Bird is here, I am sure he'd be happy to have that conversation as well. He has extensive advising experience here at UF. Okay, I just want to stop for a moment and make sure I did not miss any questions or hands raised. Please don't be afraid to speak up. There were a lot in the private chat. Okay. Any other questions from anyone else? Yes, Kristen, I'm happy to chat with you. I'm happy to set up office hours. Send me an email. Can I review a good example of what a good writing sample would be? Mel, since you provide the writing samples to the offices, what is a good writing sample?
That's a great question. I don't know if you've ever written a memo before. That's probably I would say that's like the most ideal.
We've also had students who've either written op-eds or are writers for the Alligator or have written a blog post. Those are also great. If you've ever worked in an office or a setting where you had to write a professional letter, that is also useful because a lot of this is constituent correspondence. So the ability to send professional emails, professional letters will demonstrate that ability to the office. No, the application is not for this spring semester. It's only for this fall. We will open up spring and summer sometime in early August, I believe. And yes, a reference can be a recommendation from a professor. But we are not asking, for those who joined late, we are not asking for recommendation letters this time around. We simply need the name, email, and phone number of that individual, and we will contact them if you are selected for an interview. Okay. If that is all, I do want to say that we will post this recording by tomorrow, and I will email it out to those of you who registered. Stay tuned, get your applications in, ask questions. I will say next week I will be in DC with the Beyond 120 program. And so I may be delayed in responding to your emails, but I will get back to you. And if you need time to talk about your application, send me a note and we'll find time next week before the deadline. I will be back in the office, the physical office, next Friday. So if anyone is in town and would like to meet, I can do that as well. All right. Thank you, Dorothy, for recording. Thank you, Teresa and Kevin, for joining us. It was so nice to see you. And thank you, Mel.